Shalom, this is Shira Sherbow coming to you from Sfat Israel and Torah for the Nations. So what is Torah? Because most of my life I did not know what Torah meant and what it was. And so I thought, okay, let me just tell you what this word means, explain it to you the way I understand it. Torah means instructions for living. Torah is timeless wisdom. And it's how we become one with God. So if you're interested in having a relationship with God, becoming one with God, what I mean by one with God is that we're all made in His image, but here we are here on this earth in this body, but we know that someday we're not going to be in this body, but we're going to just be left with our soul. And our soul is going to go back to God where it came from. And we want to hear, well done, job well done, whatever it is that each of us is here for. We each have a specific job to do while we're here. And so we were given these timeless instructions. The Torah is for every generation, every civilization. It's for all time. And so what happened was God wanted a certain kind of society. You could call it a certain kind of kingdom. You know, when the most important word when it comes to God is ata, you, because we want to recognize that it's about Him. We say it's your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And we are always telling God it's about Him. Torah is kind of like an antidote for narcissism, because it keeps us from being the center of the universe. We are not the center of the universe. God is who it's all about. So if you want to know what God wants from you, what your obligations to God are, this is what Torah studies are for. And so this is what we offer. We offer to study the Torah with you, and technology is a wonderful thing. You can go to torahforthenations.org and you can contact us. And there was actually a class taught at Harvard called the happiness class, and there was a Jewish professor teaching it, and he's teaching all the timeless wisdom from the Torah, because we are all made in the image of God, and God gave us His wisdom on how to have a happy life. But more than that, what He wants from us is to work together to create the kind of society that He wants us to have. We call it a society filled with justice and compassion, or world peace. And so we are on this journey. We've been on this journey a long time. Mankind has been on this journey to produce this kind of home for God, to make this earth a home for God. And what was going on at the time that God gave His Torah and made His big grand debut to the world and introduced Himself to the world, what was happening was that the Hebrew people were slaves in Egypt. And the Torah is kind of a protest against abuse and power, hierarchical governments. And there was a belief that there were certain people that were made in the image of God, like the Pharaoh, like the kings, and that everybody else was just kind of put on earth to serve those people. And so there needed to be a protest against that kind of abuse of power, because every one of us is made in the image of God. And this is the message that God wanted the world to have, that it's not about survival of the fittest, those kinds of societies. It's not about taking advantage of the weak or the poor. But so the Hebrew people were slaves, and God, in a miraculous way, showed up on the scene and took these about 3 million, but they were little in the sense that they were powerless, ragtag group of people. They weren't a nation, they were just slaves, and they were were under the rule of Egypt, which was the greatest superpower in the world and had been for some time. So in front of the whole world, God took this group of people out of Egypt, and there was a situation that set up where they had to cross the Red Sea, and it's scientifically proven and historically proven. That's why all the main religions of the world believe in the Torah, because it happened in front of millions of people, and this act of these people coming out of Egypt, and so here they are, slaves on foot, and the Egyptians are in their chariots, and the scene sets up for God just parts the Red Sea, and the Hebrews go through, and all the men on chariots are stuck in the mud, and the water comes crashing down. So this is something that was taught generation to generation before there were books, before there was any way of writing things down. People had an oral tradition of telling these stories to their children of what happened. And everybody knew what happened to Egypt and what happened to these slaves. And so why did God want to take the weakest group? It's a really great underdog story. He took the weakest group, and they were able to escape from the strongest superpower of that day. And he did that so that he could bring them into the desert, and he could give them these instructions, the Torah, instructions for living. Okay, whatever they're doing in all these other societies around the world, the Egyptian pharaohs, this is not doing on earth as it is in heaven. This is not the kind of kingdom that God wants to be king of. He wants a whole different kind of society. He wants a society with the justice and compassion, and all of these radical things at that time are going to be introduced into the world through the Torah. The Torah has been around a long time now, so these things seem common to us. But at this time, for one thing, God was a God like none of the other pagan gods. The pagan gods were all gods that you could see. And this God was all about hearing him, listening to his voice, and having a partnership with him. What happened on Mount Sinai was compared to like a marriage. So God comes, and he wants to be a God with a covenant, like a covenant with his people, an agreement with his people. He's going to do his part. They're going to do their part. And so he gives the Torah, Moses goes up on Mount Sinai, and he's up there 40 days, and it doesn't take 40 days to get a written Torah. But what was going on in those 40 days was he was getting the oral Torah. There's two parts to the Torah. And the oral Torah is the word of mouth explanation of the written Torah. You really can't understand the written Torah without the oral Torah. So God was explaining to him, because the oral Torah is maybe like a blueprint or an outline of what God wanted, but then each thing needed to be explained in depth, because you can't just pick it up and read it and understand it. And that's why we have Torah studies. And so there's so many secrets in all of the Hebrew letters. You can take a 6-year-old could read the Torah and take it on a surface level, and then it goes deeper and deeper and deeper, and there's lots of it's just a thing you could spend your whole life reading and learning all the deep secrets, because this is God's Torah. It was a great crime to even change one dot or one comma or one letter from the Torah. Everything had to be exactly the way it was given, because it was almost like the letters have power and meaning in the way that they're set up, and so you couldn't change anything. You'd be changing the formula, and so everything had to be kept on these scrolls and copied exactly the way that God gave it. And so there's nothing in the history of mankind has ever happened like it did on Mount Sinai, when these Hebrew people were given God's instructions for living and how to create the society. And so the Hebrew people later became the nation of Israel. And so what is going on now is that Israel is supposed to take the world. The God of Israel is one day going to be the God of the whole world. And so it's a journey, and it's just like when we put a destination in our GPS, and then when we make a wrong turn, if we don't follow the instructions, it says, oh, recalculating. And so there's been a lot of wrong turns, there's been a lot of recalculating, but the good news is that we will get to the final destination. The final destination is to create this kind of society, a society of justice and compassion, and the society that God wants from us. It's a world peace, and this is what we are going for, and this will eventually happen, and we'll just recalculate and keep going on this journey. But this is what Torah is all about. Torah is, you can learn from the Torah what your obligations are to God, what He expects from you, and there's one set of expectations and obligations if you are part of the Jewish people, but not before God started creating the Jewish nation, starting with Abraham, the first 11 chapters of the Torah are all about just mankind. And we know that Noah was a righteous man. He was the first man to be called righteous in his generation. So funny story was when I was my first day of college signing up in Texas, we were supposed to fill out what religion we were, what denomination we were. And I remember not even understanding what denomination was, and going up to the lady and saying, what if I don't want to be a denomination? Like I said, what if I just want to be a human being that loves God? And so she looked at the paper, and at the very bottom there was something said other. She goes, okay, we'll just check other. So I felt like I was an other, and it was just a few years ago that I found out that that's pretty much what Noah was. That's pretty much what God had intended for the nations of the world. Not for us to be any certain, we don't have to be any kind of denomination, any kind of anything except a human being. And so I decided to convert to Judaism after I started studying the Torah. But then I started to think about my children, and I thought, well, surely the message isn't that everybody in the world has to be Jewish. So what do people do who want to fulfill their obligation to God, who want to be one with God? What is the message? And so this is what we teach at Torah for the Nations. You're just a human being. If you are in this category of other, where you don't want to be Jewish or Christian or Islam or any of the many denominations and different things, you just want to be a human being that wants to learn God's Torah, that wants to learn what's expected of you and how to be part of this mission given to mankind to make this world a home for God. Part of it is to support Israel's mission to be a light to the nations, and to just learn from the people that God appointed to be teachers. And so this is what we do now. So we're reaching out to people that have just got to a place where, they just say, I just want to be a human being. I just want to have a relationship with God. I want to be one with Him. I want to know what He expects from me. And so we teach what is called the 7 laws of children of Noah. and I'll just do more teachings on that, but I just wanted to basically tell you what the Torah is. The Torah is an antidote for narcissism, because it's all about God, and we say Ata, you. It's all about you, your will be done, your kingdom come. It's your Torah, and we become one with Him when we make His Torah our Torah. And so that's the plan. There is a God. He has a plan. The plan is to be on this journey to bring the world to a place of world peace. And no matter how many times we have to recalculate and make mistakes, in the end, we will get there. All right, so I hope you have a little bit of a better understanding of what is Torah. So contact us at torahforthenations.org, and we would love to talk to you.